to bring in Matthew Sanderson, who is an election law analyst for NBC, also an attorney with the political law group of Kaplan and Drysdale. It's good to see you. Look, I want to go back to what the president said, not just yesterday, but he's been saying all along. There are, quote, hundreds of thousands of fraudulent votes in multiple states. Is it even possible to rig an election on that kind of scale right now?
No, and I think it's telling, and people at home should not look at what he's saying in a press conference or on Twitter, but what's being said in court. And, in that context, it's easy to kind of lampoon the president's post-election maneuvering. He's presided over a comedy of errors that's been spectacularly unsuccessful by any measure, with he and his allies scoring just a single modest victory in court and over 30 losses with still more to come. But I don't think we shouldn't let Rudy Giuliani's dripping hair dye or a pack of Trump lawyers who somehow can't seem to spell lull us into thinking that this is merely a laughable effort. This could have long-term consequences for the cohesion and interests of our country, and that's what's worth paying attention to. They're baselessly and repeatedly attacking the American election system.
Yeah, and to that point, we've seen the court cases you mentioned. We've seen hand recounts, all kinds of things that are designed to instill more faith in the system. You've had any number of Republican elections officials saying all of this is legit, all of this is something you should have faith in, and yet we see in the polls that there are millions of Americans who still don't. Is there something you think can or should be done to convince people that this election wasn't fixed, or they shouldn't worry going forward about casting a ballot and it won't be counted fairly?
Well, long term, we can certainly talk about what additional security and verifying measures should be implemented within our election system. But take Georgia, for example. They will count the votes for the third time. They're counting those now. And yet President Trump has characterized the Republican Secretary of State as a, quote, enemy of the people. There's no satisfying President Trump at this point. It's not, his objections are not based on any deficiency in the process. It's because his whole objection is because he doesn't like the election outcome that has been reached. And as I said before, this is enormously damaging, I think, both to the party and to the Republican Party and to the long-term interests of the country. As someone who's been a Republican longer than the president, I'm very troubled at the prospect that Republican voters will stay home in future elections if they feel like the system is rigged. And in terms of the country overall, a cornerstone of our republic is voters' collective faith that election results reflect their will. And, we would all be upset if President Trump set fire to the White House on his way out of town. He's doing something just as damaging here. And that might seem like it's hyperbole, but it's not. This is a foundational concept of our democracy.
Well, one of the other things that the president said is that if the Electoral College certifies the election, he will leave. So that's going to happen next month, right? Is this a real end date for all of this or not? Do all of the challenges go away once the Electoral College meets?
Well, he might leave. And I should mention, nothing that the Trump team has done or will do can change the fact that Joe Biden will be sworn in as the 46th president of the United States. But I don't think that this ends with the inauguration or with the voting of the Electoral College, because this really isn't about vindicating a legal right or providing for the faithful application of the law. This is, at bottom, an exercise in shifting blame away from the president for his electoral loss. This is an exercise in emotional catharsis for the president. With each new lawsuit and parking lot press conference, a little bit of balm for the presidential ego. And that's a bottomless pit. And that's why I don't think this ends with a legal deadline or a lawsuit dismissal. This only ends when my fellow Republicans muster the courage to tell the president to sit down, go have himself a good cry, and come back some other time, maybe with a message and a plan that can actually finish first.
Matthew Sanderson, great note to leave it on. Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming in on a holiday weekend.